The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 358 with Scott Fawcett, creator of Decade Golf, a tour-proven course management system to shoot lower scores. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 18 Strong Podcast, where we're here to help you build a stronger game because we know that everyone deserves to play better longer. This episode is an exciting one for me. We get to talk with Scott Fawcett, the creator of Decade Golf. And if you haven't heard of Decade Golf, it's a tour-proven course management system designed to shoot lower scores. Now, that doesn't mean that it's just for tour players. This is for every level of player. In fact, Scott said it's really designed initially to help younger players learn how to manage their course and to be able to play better so they don't have to go out onto the tour and learn how to do all this stuff. So in this episode, we talk with Scott about the Decade system, of course, and really how most of us don't have any kind of strategy when we go out onto the golf course. So we talk about how to figure out shot patterns. Should you hit the ball two different ways? Should you learn to fade it and draw it? We talk about just making better decisions on the golf course, as well as Scott's involvement in tour players, the players that he's worked with that have gone on to win major tournaments, and really how most of the tour players in one way, shape, or form are using some sort of background in the Decade system. So this is a really exciting episode because even if you're not a very competitive golfer, you're like me, you're going out on golf trips with the guys, you're playing on the weekend, you're trying to win your club championship, this is also for you. So don't think that this is a super complicated thing that's only for the tour level players. So we're going to get into all of that right after this. Our partners over at Linksole have been providing us with the best apparel for both on the course and off the course, from polos to t-shirts like the one I have on right now. Everything that they have is meant to be worn from the golf course to wherever you're going next, whether that be casual, whether that be to the beach. There's all different options over there. So go to 18strong.com/Linksole. You'll get 20% off of anything in your cart over on Linksole's website. So again, 18strong.com/Linksole for our favorite brand of apparel for anything on the golf course and off. Now let's get to this week's interview. Scott Fawcett, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. I always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, man. So this is really exciting. I alluded to this in an email that I was just on a golf trip with a bunch of buddies to Nashville and really wish that I would have had this podcast episode done so I had a little more tools in the tool belt before going out there. But so Decade Golf obviously has become, just kind of blown up over the last several years. Give me just a little bit of the brief history for people that maybe don't know Decade and don't know kind of the story and you know, the golfer that you worked with initially. Sure. Right out of the gate that really kind of blew this thing up.
Sure. You know, I played golf at Texas A&M, got finance and economics degrees, and played professionally unsuccessfully. Well, I say that for 6 years out of college. I won a couple times on the Hooters Tour, unsuccessfully, meaning I did make it to the PGA Tour, but I was pretty solid otherwise. And then started an energy company when Texas deregulated back in 2002, which is technically still my day job. But right around that time, I started playing a lot of poker, which again, I've studied finance and econ and math quite a bit, but I'd never really thought of golf as a math game. But after studying poker in the early 2000s, I started thinking like, you know, if you get a bad beat in poker, you'd better get your head around you or you're just throwing money away really quick. And somehow that never dawned on me as a professional golfer that whenever I'm getting pissed off that I'm just throwing money away, but apparently I'm not that smart. But so then in 2011, they started releasing the strokes gain statistics. And I kind of realized that with the shot patterns stuff we had, there was just like a little idea there that started kind of turning in 2011. And then in 2013, when they released the entire strokes gain catalog, I was like, that's exactly what I needed. I didn't realize that they were tracking that much data with strokes gained. But I just realized that we could combine, shot patterns from launch monitors like a Foresight quad into, and then combine it with the strokes to hole outs. And then it's just a giant weighted average math problem, essentially. It's what's funny. I spoke at MIT and Wharton last year and I'm like, guys, this is just weighted average math. This is not really very advanced stuff. I've never felt dumber in my life. But I actually I was talking to somebody about this just yesterday. I wouldn't have thought of it otherwise, but in the 2013 US Mid-Am, I caught a root on the second hole and really hurt my right elbow, wound up shooting 83 and called it a day after 18 holes so I could just go ahead and head on back to Dallas because it was not good. Well, that's the same elbow that the week before the Texas Am, that's right around the time that I started doing all of this work and was planning on playing a lot of golf in the summer of 2014. And the week before the Texas Am, I got a cortisone shot in my right elbow, and the doctor actually paralyzed my right arm for a couple of days,
Whoa.
which, yeah, it was pretty wild. I mean, my arm just kind of folded up. And he was like, I mean, he was using a sonogram. He's the Mavericks team doctor. So I wasn't concerned until I went back and he's like, oh, yeah, I thought I paralyzed your arm. I was like, oh, really? Because it just literally curled up like this and I could pull it down and sit on it. But obviously, I can't play golf with a paralyzed arm. But once it came back to life a couple of days later, he was like, I would take a couple months and not play because I would let it just whatever would happen in there really clean itself out. And so Will Zalatoris, who I used to have to tell everyone who that is, he was just a 17-year-old junior golfer at my home course. So and I've known him since I was on the Korn Ferry Tour in 2009, which was right around the time he moved to Dallas from San Francisco. So he's just a 9-year-old kid out there, 10, 12-year-old kid, whatever, and just following me around like a puppy dog. So he and I have been doing chipping and putting and playing and everything since he was, literally single digits of age. And so I called him and I was like, let's go grab some lunch. I want to explain something to you. And so I kind of showed him what I did with the math and the strategy. Cause I mean, he's a great ball striker now, obviously, but he was just as good back then. I mean, he really was unbelievable. And just kind of explained it all to him. And I was like, let me caddy for you next week. Let me just try to play you like a video game. And he was like, absolutely. Cause again, at the time he was 3,300 in the world in the junior rankings, had never really won anything at all. And I caddied for him and he won the Texas Am by, now I can't even remember. It was either 3 or 4. Shot
Wow.
4 straight under par rounds, which he'd never done before in a tournament, and just on and on. And, it was just interesting breaking it down after the fact because so much about it was just expectation management, not having ridiculous expectations, and then obviously playing approach shots correctly with targeting, that is. So since he's such a good ball striker, and he definitely was struggling with his putting back then also. So he's trying to make birdies with his approach shots instead of just saying, you know what, I'm probably going to birdie the par 5s. I'm going to make my birdies on these par 4s just within the variance within my shot pattern, meaning I don't even have to aim at a hole and I'll accidentally pull or push it every so often. And then it's really about bogey avoidance, which again, we'll talk about this a million times over throughout the thing, but caddy for him there, he won. He qualified for the U.S. Junior the following month. I went down and caddied for him in Houston and he won. And then that's just really where, like I say, the SMU coach came up to me at the U.S. Juniors like, I don't know what you're teaching him, but I think you've got something to teach these kids because you just have no idea. I mean, I've known him since we were in college. He played at SMU while I was at A&M. So you just have no idea how dumb these kids are, like we were at the same time.
Yeah.
And so a month or two later, he asked me if I would come teach it all to Bryson DeChambeau, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's funny. Bryson's one of those names that can be just a one-word name, even though it's not like Tiger or something like that. So I go teach it to DeChambeau. A couple months later, he wins the NCAAs. And, it's just funny because looking back at it, everybody has got crazy talent. I mean, even the listeners think they should have shot lower every single time they play. These guys are no different. That's when a 10 handicap thinks they're gonna be happy when they're finally a scratch. It's like, no, you're not. You're 25 percentile of worse rounds feel just as bad or even worse because you feel super stupid because you're a scratch. So it's just about taking these young players and just cleaning up their thought process, picking better targets, having more reasonable expectations. And so next thing you know, like last year, I have 11 of the top 15 players from PGA Tour University were decade members in college, 17 of the top 30 from this year's Korn Ferry class. I mean, it's just hilarious how these young players just clean up their brain a little bit. We used to always think that you had to get out on tour and learn all the shots to start peaking in your early 30s. In hindsight, it's like, no, you needed to get older, get a prefrontal cortex that actually functions, then screw it up for a couple of years to finally learn your lesson. And here we are at 32, an actual adult.
Yeah. I mean, I look at myself, I look at my buddies, and many of us that didn't play golf growing up, now it's a huge passion of ours. And many of us are just recreational between, say a 5 and 15, maybe even 20 handicaps. But even just, us as 40-year-old guys, I'm like, man, how much can we gain simply by understanding how to play the game better? Now, I have a son. I was mentioning he's 15 years old, made the freshman golf team last year, but he's really just kind of getting into any kind of competitive golf. And I'm like, man, this is the stuff that really I need to put in front of him right now so he can kind of learn that.
I think that somehow the best players just intuitively figured it out. And Tiger would actually be one of the few that didn't until he turned pro. He was just so much better than everyone physically and hit it so much further than everyone. that he could crush junior and amateur golf. And I'm sure he would have had a great career, but I've got this one video in the app where it's from the same video when Curtis Strange is asking him what would be a good finish this week. And he's like, first and second sucks. And Curtis tells him you'll win, or you'll learn rather. And then it's like, no, you will actually, Curtis. But
yeah.
And then later in that video, that same interview though, he said, what's kind of some of the learning you've done since you've been out here? And he said that he had played with Nick Price the prior year in the US Open. And he said that after the first round, Nick shot like 65 or 6 and was leading. And he asked me, like, how many pins did you fire today? He said he fired it 2. And then he went out the next day and did the same thing. After the round, he asked me, he said, like, 2 again. And Tiger's like, well, here I was firing it every single one of them. And Nick at the time was number 1 in the world and, crushing everything. And I really think that was probably the most important 36 holes of his life, to realize there might be more to this than just bludgeoning a golf course. And that's where you can really, it's fun going back and listening to a lot of his interviews now, because man, you can really, so much of it sounds like sports cliche, but you can really pick up a ton of stuff. And one of my favorite ones I remember is, I can't remember if it was the US Open or if it was, I think it was just a tournament at Torrey, but they asked him and Joe LaCava after the round, they said, what was the best shot you hit all day? And in unison, immediately, they both said the 3-iron on whichever hole that par 3 is on the back. And I was like, there's no chance that ball is going to be within 30 feet of the hole. But they both immediately, any par 3 out there that you've got a 3-iron in your hand, there's no chance the hole's his target. And I just listened, and I went back and found it. I think the shot was like 42 feet from the hole. And it's
Wow.
like they both said it was an absolute laser beam at his target. And it's like, there you go. This guy's, I'm not saying anyone should be firing 3-irons at flags, but like they both knew that was such a good shot and was obvious where their target was. And again, just learning how to play the game correctly. Like I say, it's just it's this thing I say all the time. But if you feel like you should have shot lower, there's only one of 2 things possible. You're either not as good as you think you are, or you made mental and strategic mistakes. There can literally be nothing else. It's one of those 2. And so once you get people, no one wants to admit they're not as good as they think they are. So then they're like, all right, well, maybe I'll turn this stone over. And I mean, again, just 100% of our decade members improve. I mean, I feel like such a snake oil salesman saying that, but literally everybody gets better because we can just track their stats and data. Just pull your head out of your butt.
Well, I mean, I think that most people have no idea really any kind of strategy. I shouldn't say most people. I'm thinking a lot of the recreational guys, a lot of the golfers that, are at the country clubs that aren't tracking hardly anything. And as I was watching some of your videos on your website, and you said that, decade, the name actually stands for 6 steps to choosing a target and playing efficient, patient, disciplined golf. And that doesn't describe many of the golfers that I know.
It describes none of them. Well, it's right. The thing that popped in my head when you said, you're trying to be kind by saying, some people played with good strategies. Like, no, literally everybody played with poor strategy back in the day. Or at a minimum, they might have chosen some good targets, but then they also had a bunch of cliches like favor this angle, leave it below the hole, all these other things that are just patently incorrect for no doubt a net negative. I mean, there just literally is nobody, Tiger excluded, in my opinion, that probably played with just perfect patient strategy.
Can you, for all of us that, strokes gained has become a huge term in the world of golf these days. We've actually had Mark Brody on the show a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But can you give us a refresher on what exactly strokes gained means in the simplest form possible? Yeah,
what you got to start doing is, rather than thinking of a shot in a certain amount of feet for a putt or a certain amount of yards for an approach shot, you've got to start thinking in shots to hole out. So generically, we know that from 8 feet, the pros are 50-50. So it takes an average of 1.5 strokes to hole out. It's basically a coin flip from 8 feet. So if I make an 8-foot putt, I've moved it 1.5 strokes closer to the hole in 1 stroke. So I gained a half a shot against my expectation. If I 2-putt it, I've moved it 2 shots closer. I've in essence lost a half a shot of expectation. So then you just know from every single inch on the golf course. So from 100 yards in the fairway, it's 2.8 shots to hole out. A 400-yard par 4 is where they average 3.98, basically 4 shots. And again, this is what's funny is most people would, when they walk up to a 400-yard par 4, they're like, okay, it's an easy hole. It's a birdie hole. They're like, no. It's an easy hole. It's a hole you've got a better chance of making par on. Mm-hmm. Even on tour, they're not making birdie that often. I mean, it's amazing, again, once you just kind of know some of these numbers. And again, Mark Brody, because obviously he's a brilliant man, they've got a number of ways that they adjust for course conditions. So it's not like this is one thing the announcers constantly get wrong, or anyone who wants to try to be like a naysayer, is they're like, well, not all 8-foot putts are the same. It's like, yeah, that's why we have a daily adjustment on tour. Now, yes, generically, if I'm sitting here caddying for you, I'm going to tell you this is about 50-50. But realistically, it's about like 1.47 to 1.53. It's just not as big of a difference as most people think to be this spot versus that spot. And again, the second E, or the first E rather, of decade is expectation. I don't know that I would have realistically known how important that was until just seeing the success of this year after year after year. And I mean, it's funny because a guy like David Ogren, won a couple times out on tour. He's caddying for the 15-year-old that caddied for Bermuda next week. He's one of his students. And so David asked me the other day if we could hop on, a call just so he could ask me some questions about how to caddy and work with these kids' brains and stuff. And the number one thing I told him was just to literally tell him the expected value from every shot. So just, if you have to have a card in your hand, knock yourself out, but just, hey, right here we are, 165 yards in the fairway. Make a 3 here, and that's tour average. Again, a lot of tourist players will say, I don't want to be tour average. It's like, again, that's not really the right way of looking at this. But if you beat this average by 3.97 and it's 4, that's 0.03 of a shot. But if you did that 18 times, it's over half a shot. You're one of the best players on the planet. That's right. Where, again, you just have to start thinking in fractions of shots, because not only can you only gain shots in fractions of shots, you also can really only lose shots in fractions of shots. So even if we go into a hard hole that has like a 4.4 scoring average, if you make bogey there, yes, you dropped a shot to par, but that's kind of irrelevant. You dropped a half or 0.6 shots to the field in your competition. That's not as painful. And like, it's really just not that big of a deal. But when you start making a double on a hole like that, because you tried something stupid from the trees, now you've lost 1.6 shots instead of 0.6 shots. It's literally almost 3 times as bad, because again, you've got to wrap your head around that you can only gain them back in tenths of a shot also. So it really is, it's only 1 shot worse to par, but it's actually 3 times ish as bad when you factor in how you've got to make it up.
When you talk about managing the expectations, I mean, I look at it as what you just said is like, this is just going to help you keep from doing stupid things, like making those stupid decisions, right? I mean, how many times have we hit it, hit it left, hit it in the trees, it's a par 5. Well, now I got to make up for that shot, and I got to go try this. So first time I heard about Decade and started looking into it, I was like, man, this seems a little bit complicated. Where do I even start? And then I know that you guys have now kind of even scaled down to the foundations, where you have kind of a lower grade level, not for the tour players, but for the guys more like myself and my buddies. So where does somebody initially start with when they're starting to get into Decade? What's the first step that they start to look at?
Well, it's funny because even when I used to do, so I created a seminar when Coach Enlow wanted me to come work for Bryson. He's like, it has to be done indoors because otherwise they would consider me a third paid coach. So I created this indoor seminar, shot a bunch of drone footage, and went in and we were giving it. And with my seminar, it used to be just straight into approach shot strategy, tee shot strategy, putting strategy. And then I ended with an hour of mental stuff. And throughout giving the seminar multiple times, the mental stuff started working its way in earlier in the session. And I'd be like, well, we're going to get to this later, but I'm going to explain it to you now. And literally I completely wound up flipping it because, again, as a self-described lunatic, I used to be the biggest basket case on the course back in the day. And so that's where we start now. So when you get the app, the first channel is technically titled Getting Started. And it is just about, here's how shot patterns work. Here's the realities of putting. Here's a few simple ways to putt. Here's why hitting one shape in a stock shot over and over and over and over again is so important. So there's probably an hour's worth of content just on, hey, this is step 1 of pulling our head out of our butt. And then the next section is the mental section, which is where I explain Dr. Larden's scorecard, which is a stat we talk about, just how you do anything is everything. So there's like 5 or 6 videos in that. And then we finally get into approach shot strategy, because I definitely have just realized if you don't have the base, you're just going to blow through the rest of it so fast that you're really not going to learn it. And that's the whole reason with the foundations is I want people to digest it. So month 1 is you just get the getting started stuff. And then 3 weeks later, we give you a little bit more. So what I'm really doing, it's technically all the same content, but it's rather than you getting all of it the day you purchase it, you get it basically over about 4 months, every 3 weeks. Cause I want you to take the 3 weeks. And then what I'll say in the last video of that series, like, okay, and I want you to take the next couple of weeks when you get out, hit balls, be looking for this, be looking for that, noticing your shot pattern. That's why I have people hit at the same target all the way through the bag. Cause I want you to be centering your shot pattern over your ultimate target, missing roughly half left and half right. When you're changing targets all the time, you don't really get as good of a feel for that. And so one of the main things that like professionals get wrong, and I definitely got wrong, was I feel like I chose good targets back in the day, but then I didn't actually try to hit it there. I would choose a target with a 7-iron, maybe 5 or 6 yards right of a flag. And then I would think, okay, well, I hope I pull this a little bit. And again, like, I don't know at what point you get good enough. I know a 30 handicap doesn't have that thought. So I don't know at what point you get good enough that thought starts creeping in. Cause I do feel like listeners have to be like, are you serious? Yes. 90% of the PGA Tour, I mean, probably not as much anymore, but 50%, certainly a couple, now 90% a couple years ago, would have that thought 5 or 6 times a day. And I do believe that that's where the outlier shots come from, is just this lack of commitment. So that's, we start with shot patterns and mindset and commitment, because that is the main thing I actually think I'm teaching.
I love that you kind of force feed us just a little bit so we can't jump ahead and get ahead of ourselves and dive into the stuff that we want to learn. And, because you naturally want to get right out to the range and go beat balls, but having that mindset. And
I don't think the production quality is that great, because it's literally me, just a golfer and an electricity salesman, just voicing over PowerPoints in here. So it's not the highest quality content, but the information in it is exactly that. I mean, it is just tailored for players like us who again, that's the whole reason it goes slow. Cause it's like, I think that most people actually enjoy the content, and I fear that they would binge watch it then. I mean, I get nothing but comments like, it's not obviously produced in a Hollywood studio, but man, I just can't stop watching these videos. And I'm like, that's exactly why I have to force you to stop watching them.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about shot patterns and, how you describe it to us, and I mean, the relevance of it, and then also picking targets and how we can kind of get a little bit better. Obviously, that's what a lot of this program's about. So we want them to get into the program, but give us some scoop there.
Sure. I mean, shot patterns are just, they're shockingly large. I mean, everybody thinks that like a tour player's just got total control over it, and they're just huge, which is why, like, on reachable par 4s, number 6 at Wingfoot immediately pops to mind, where the layup is about 200 off the tee to leave about 100 yards. And, it's a dead if you ship it up there around the green, and then you're on the wrong spot. But it's the fairway's only 20 yards wide at 200. Like, those guys aren't going to hit that much more than about 70% of the time. And so now 30% of the time you're sitting back there in the rough. But so that's just an indication of how big shot patterns actually are. Again, with just a 5 or a 6 iron for those guys, they will not hit a 20-yard fairway nearly as much as you think. Now, if we step it all the way back to driver, I mean, they're just massive. I mean, there are holes on the PGA Tour where the shot pattern's 100+ yards wide on a hole that's like, they're kind of all aiming. It's not like this is some huge hole at Pacific Dunes or whatever, Bandon Dunes, wherever it is that all the architecture lovers love with the width and angles. Number 11 at TPC Sawgrass has a lake on the left and a desert on the right. And the shot pattern is literally 80+ yards wide every single year. And I mean, once you understand that, again, like, now, if we come up to a hole that dog legs left around a lake, like number 18 at Sawgrass, it used to be a fader like me would get up there and try to hit a draw to work it in. It's like, or you could just, if my shot pattern is roughly 70 yards wide with driver, I can just aim 35 yards right of the furthest pylon I can carry, and then just hammer driver. I'm kind of crossing my fingers I hit it left, but I'm certainly not hoping I hit it left, because if I do this 4 times, it should work out to about 50-50. Or what I talk about, winning requires luck so much, it's also possible that just 3 out of the 4 days I happen to pull it on 18 and I'm sitting out there in the fairway. That's just luck, and that's really convenient. So just understanding shot patterns and how to manage them around the golf course is just, again, literally everything. What people need to do is kind of go hit 20 or 30 balls with the same club at the same target, and just notice where it's going. I mean, that was definitely once Will and I agreed at lunch that I was going to come loop for him at the Texas Am. We went straight out to Bent Tree here in Dallas because I was like, I really feel like getting him to commit to targets is the hardest part. Like in a pre-mortem, what's going to go wrong if this goes wrong? He's going to be hoping he pulls stuff. So we went out there and I literally just sat behind him with a yellow notepad and we just had him hit balls at the same flag. And I was just kind of dotting how far left and right each one was. And then just kind of showed him like, look at this. I mean, I'll give the kid credit. First of all, he did actually center his shot pattern directly over the target, which most people will be skewed one direction or the other. And, but what's amazing is, and back then I didn't really know the numbers yet, but I was like, I mean, this is incredible, man. From 180 yards, the vast majority of your shots are within 10 yards left and right of the flag here. And he was like, Is that good? I'm like, I don't really know, but it seems good. Cause now I think about you out there at that distance on a golf course and basically never missing the green. Yeah, that's really good. But also what he had to notice was if we're on a 20-yard wide green and we are aiming at the middle of the green, if the pin's on the left, right, like I don't really care where the flag is. One of these shots that I kind of handmade a TrackMan scatter plot. I didn't really have access to a TrackMan in 2014. I just kind of handmade a TrackMan scatter plot and just illustrated that to him. And again, I'll give him all the credit in the world because that was definitely the one thing I thought he'd screw up. And we just went out there in the golf tournament. And this is what's funny is actually the first 9 holes, he literally hit every single shot exactly where I told him to. And I was sitting there like, I'm pretty sure this kid would have shot lower if I wasn't caddying today because he would have stuffed a whole bunch. But he shot like 67 because he played the par 5 as well. And then we came out the next day and he just hit it all over the face, all over the lot. He was super nervous and he grounded out a 70. And I was like, wow, that's the difference. That should have been like a 76 with the way he hit it and where his frustration level would have been in patience and just everything. If this had been the prior week, it for sure would have been a 76. And like I say, just understanding the realities of shot patterns and the realities of resultant expectation. Just what is your expected value score from any given spot on the course? It's just hard to get mad or frustrated. Again, I mean, trust me, you can, but it's just a lot harder.
So I've heard you talk about it in regards to like a shotgun, right? Like you see the pellets spray, and many times when we're looking at a pin or a target, I think we think so much left to right, but also that shot pattern goes forward and backwards, right? Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about like par 3s. Most people or even just from the fairway, people are talking about center of the green, but that's not always the case, right?
No, definitely not. Again, like this is where a lot of people who like to give me a hard time, they're just like, oh, center of the green. How's this guy making money just telling people to hit at the center of the green? I'm like, it's not even close to that. Center of the green on number 18 at St. Andrews, when the green is 50 yards wide and you're probably about 40 yards, that's really bad advice. Center of the green on number 10 at Pebble Beach, where the green is only 17 yards wide and there's an ocean on the right. That's also really bad advice because you should be aiming almost at the left edge of the green. So really, again, that's just the decade acronym. D, distance, how far are we? We'll skip the E because it's expectation. C, correct target is your target based on the length of the shot. And then A, analyze is analyzing the surrounding hazards. And that's, again, it's just not as simple as middle of the green. And it's something you said earlier too, about like, it kind of seems a little complicated, and like, it is, it is complicated because golf is a complicated game. That's, again, I'm just giving you a hard time, but like, trust me, that's the main thing I get all the time too. And I'm like, well, what's more complicated, chess or checkers? Well, checkers. Do you think you could beat a grandmaster at chess? I highly doubt it. I don't care who the best player in the world is at checkers. Like, they're probably not that much better than you are. It's a pretty straightforward game.
Right.
Yeah. So just really understanding that choosing your target based on the constraints of the shot is by far what you need to be doing. And again, center of the green is just, I mean, it's the correct thing a lot, but also it's not. I mean, there's a number of times Mark Brody did a study on this where he was just showing, he was just an 8-iron, just like a 170-yard shot to a back left pin. And he did did the calculus with the shot pattern centered over the target and over the middle of the green, and then also over the optimal target. And the middle of the green was worse than aiming directly at the flag. Like, so there's this inflection point typically between the flag and the middle of the green. And I'll say, like, I got super lucky on the system that I came up with. Like, I did a lot of math, and I could do a lot of math in my head to come up with the targets. I got super lucky that it's actually a pretty easy system to teach people to do, again, based on this baseline number and the analysis that you do in your practice rounds. But the long and short, where you originally were going with your question, I mean, people just suck to front hole locations, and it's just because you can't over pure a shot. So if you've hit a 7-iron 170 a single time in your life, you're like, that's my perfect 170 club.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't want to be negative, but you average 160 with it. And to back pins and front pins, you can largely get away with it, but to front hole locations, you simply can't. And this is, again, even for tour players. Like, anytime I'm working with a new tour player, I'm always just like, well, I mean, those amateurs on Wednesday, they're just idiots. They have no clue how far the ball goes. And they're like, oh my God, that's just hilarious. I'm like, yeah, you don't either. It's less awful, but you're still wrong by 2 or 3 yards. And now when the pin's on the front and it's 5 or 6 yards on, and you don't know how far you carry this club by 2 or 3 yards, that's probably an extra 25% of the time you're coming up short. And this is what's hard is, yeah, I want you to carry it probably past that pin. And if you hit it perfect, you're probably going to have 30 or 35 feet coming back. But that's better than you're going to be chipping from short, which is probably below the level of the green, which is terrible, probably in rough or a bunker. Like, that's not good either. And so you just really, you need to hit 30 or 40 balls. This is why, I mean, again, I don't like just coming on and bashing Arcos, but I heard they were bashing me the other day, so whatever. This is where just telling me the average of the length of how far you hit every 7-iron, that's really pretty useless information. It's better than nothing, but into the wind hurts more than downwind helps. Was I punching it? Was I ripping it up? Like, there's just more to it. And again, like, it's great for a 10-ish handicap, 15 handicap. I'm sure that there's enough information in there. But if you actually want to be good at this game, you need to know how far you carry every club in a static 0 wind, 0 altitude, or your home altitude environment. And then you need to figure out how to play for it, which guys like Jeff Smith and other people, tour instructors they've got this system now that my understanding is an FBI ballistics expert came up with it on how to rate, how to play and judge into the wind and downwind and crosswinds. Towards now, it's every caddy on tour will just have this little card in their yardage book cover that tells you basically exactly what the wind's going to do to every shot. Now, obviously, if you're saying it's 10 miles an hour, it's blowing 5 to 15. So we've still got that variable. But as long as you can put a pretty decent average number on it, the wind is almost irrelevant anymore.
Wow.
There's just so much stuff like that I don't think people at home really realize.
So what are the things that we tend to track, or I mean, many don't track anything, but what are some of the things that we tend to track that really you're like, that doesn't even matter? And then what are the things, I know on your website, you've got the 5 things that we should be tracking. So what are some of those, if you want to share those with us too?
Total putts is beyond useless. Fairways hit, I mean, as long as it's over 50-ish%, I'm going to need more information to, like, do you hit it 320? Do you hit it 240? Like, I'm going to need more information. Greens and regulation is great. But, and this is where Mark Brody and I were actually playing golf at Pinehurst a couple of years ago during the Golf Magazine Top 100. And the guy, I think it was Cordy Walker, that was walking along playing with us, was like, what's the most important stat to track? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess greens and regulation is the most correlated to score. So I guess greens and regulation. And Mark, because he's a billion times smarter than me, jumps in. He's like, well, if you think about it, Scott, if you know that it's pretty much perfectly correlated with score, you don't really need to track greens and regulation. Because if you tell me you hit 60% of the greens and regulation, I can pretty much tell you what your average score is and vice versa. And I'm like, yeah, now that makes total sense. So you know, the strokes gained putting is a pretty good metric without being on tour. Everything else is pretty flawed using strokes gained. Again, this is why, as a guy who sells a stats portal for a living, I try to always make people know, like, the stats is secondary. The point of Decade is not statistics. It's to teach you how to score so you can figure this stuff out on your own. Because all the strokes gained stuff on tour, we've got daily adjustments, but at your home course, if you're playing Harbor Town and I'm playing Augusta, and we're using the same benchmarks for strokes gained driving, that's not going to go well for you, because you're going to be hitting a lot of 2-irons off the tees and you're going to be hitting them in trees. And I'm going to hit driver on every single hole, and I'm not going to be in the trees that much. And so if you're just using distance off the tee, again, there's just a number of things that are flawed, but that's what you alluded to a second ago, the 5 stats everyone should be tracking. back in the late 90s, I mean, yes, Tiger was doing great, but I think he won maybe 3 times in like 97 or 8. And then each other year was just a win. I mean, it wasn't like he was crushing it. And he won 8 of the last 11, I believe, in 99. And my understanding is he basically started tracking, okay, when I finish around and think I should have shot lower, why? What is it? Like, it's not because I missed a green with a 4-iron. It's because I missed this easy up and down, or I made a bogey with a wedge, or I 3-putted from 20 feet. Like, those are the ones that we want to identify. So Tiger came up with these 5 statistics: double bogeys, bogeys on par 5s. He tracked bogey with 9-iron or less, but considering how far the ball goes and everything now, and what I think he probably hit 9-iron back then, I just say bogeys from inside 150, blown easy save, and 3 putts. And again, blown easy save is subjective to his opinion. So I just have players track how many 2 chips. And again, if you sit down after a round of golf and you think I should have shot lower and it's not one of those 5, you're kidding yourself. I mean, that's the situation of you're not as good as you think you are. But if it's one of those 5, I mean, again, obviously a 10 handicap is just going to make bogeys from 140 and they're going to 3-putt. But even Tiger, it wasn't no blown easy saves. It's how many. Tiger figured out that if he could keep those 5 things to 6 or less, so 1.5 a round. I mean, again, if you think about it, that's not none. I mean, that's a decent amount of pretty dumb stuff. He would win. And the actual number, it's like 6.2. Like, again, you can't really do the blown easy saves, but the actual number, when you go through and do a little math on it, he was right around correct of what you needed to have a top 5 finish on tour, because that most of that's just scoring data that we can go back in and actually analyze. And again, this is where when I say like I was a lunatic in my 20s, like I literally would go get all pissed off, not go to Chili's with my buddies and talk about all the dumb stuff I did that day, and then never think about it again. And here's Tiger doing the same stuff, literally at the same time. He and I graduated from college at the same time. And he's like, well, I'd like to stop doing that. And I'm just like, man, this is frustrating. Shocker, he did better than I did.
Right.
I want to take just a second to thank our new partner, which I'm really excited to announce, is First Form. First Form is a company that is here in St. Louis, based in St. Louis. It's a nutritional company that is doing incredible things in the world of nutrition. And one of the reasons that we decided to partner with First Form is obviously we're very impressed with their dedication to their products and the quality of the products, but really it's the dedication to them helping their customers get real results. Aside from just the products, we got a chance to go and actually visit the facility, again, here in St. Louis, and really walk the halls of the corporate offices, but we got to see the manufacturing plant or the warehouse. And it's not just a place where they're packaging supplements and shipping them out. It's a culture, it's a community, and you can see that amongst the employees. You can see that their culture and their core values that are not just pieces of art on their wall, they're actually living them there, and they're helping to expand those into the community. And really, that's why we partner with First Form. Obviously, their products are incredible. Otherwise, we wouldn't suggest them either. We use them on a regular basis. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about their products and what they can do for your fitness, what they can do for your golf game. The protein powders, the multivitamins, the protein sticks, the hydration packets, all of those products we're going to highlight in future episodes. But we just wanted to really celebrate our new partnership with First Form. You can go to their website, firstform.com/18strong. And we're going to be doing a giveaway every single month with anybody that buys through that link. So go to firstform.com, that's PHORM.com/18strong. That'll take you directly to their website, and you can check their whole suite of products. It's including some of their fitness apparel, and anything that's purchased over there, you're going to be enrolled into our list for our giveaway.
So when after your round, you track those things, you see, okay, I did this, I had this many 3-putts. Then what do we do with that? How do we take that and get better at it, as opposed to just what you were just saying, like, okay, tomorrow I'll just count them up again.
Well, obviously, if you're tracking them in the Decade app, we send you content once a week based on your statistics. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, we'll send you a video like, hey, we noticed you made a couple bogeys with a wedge, or did this or that or whatever. There's 200 plus videos that are just like 5-ish minutes long that are kind of in this back catalog behind the scenes. And so it goes through, I could say with some artificial intelligence to sound smarter than it is, but with a little bit of AI, figures out which ones it sends you stuff again each week. But if you're tracking them on your own, there was a player on tour that he was wanting me to find something for him to work on a couple of years ago. And I'm like, honestly, your scoring average, he's a fader. Like your scoring average from the left rough sucks. It's like a 0.3 or 0.4 shots higher than from the right rough. I don't really have any advice for you on that other than notice the next time you're in the left rough, am I trying something that's probably a little bit harder than I need to here? I don't really know what to tell you other than that because I can't see each shot. And the main thing that I would tell people that want to go out and track the Tiger 5 mistakes is just make them less. And the next time, whichever one you're having a bunch of, you need to be aware the next time you're in that situation. Like, you know what, I'm making a lot of bogeys from inside 150. I'm 120 here. Let's really think this shot through. What's my target? What's the surrounding hazards? And then really commit and like really try to make a par here. Like, again, it sounds dumb, but like that's the exact advice I give tour players. So if a tour player sometimes like, I'm really struggling with my gap wedge right now, let's just don't screw this one up. And again, I don't need you to make many birdies to average 2.9. Like but you just can't make bogeys. You just cannot make bogeys. And again, that's just some of the funny parts about it is so many of the older guys that I've talked with, tour players, they're just like, dude, when we were down by Tiger, we just knew we couldn't catch him because he wasn't going to help us. And I'm like, yeah, he's really good. I get it. I'm not oblivious to that. But also, if you're really good and you're out there just trying to avoid those 5 mistakes, again, I don't really care what he says in some of his interviews and stuff where he's like, well, you got to get the hammer down here and there and whatever. Like, I've analyzed 20,000 of his shots by hand where the targets had to have been based on the sum of all of them. I just don't think that he really changed much. He just went out there and he tried to play good, smart golf from the first to the 72nd hole. And like I say, I'm probably about to make a total idiot out of myself in Champions Tour Q School here in a couple weeks because I've not played golf in months. But there's part of me that feels a little bit confident that if I can just get out on the course a couple times to do some putting drills, I'm going to outthink these guys just for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'm going to play more patient, disciplined golf. And a lot of times in a Q school, it's about just not doing dumb stuff more than it is doing incredible stuff. And then if you're taking that same mindset into your club championship or into a full tour series, it's like if I do the right thing for 54 straight holes, there's a much better chance of me coming out on top with just a little bit of luck. I mean, you're still going to have to, if you got 20 guys that are all kind of the same, you're still going to have a little bit of luck for it to go your way, but you can certainly ensure you're going to play well.
Well, that's what I'm thinking is like knowing that most people out there, especially in a club championship or, some kind of a guys trip or like nobody has any strategy around what they're doing out there.
No.
We have a Ryder Cup that we do every single year with a bunch of college buddies, wide range of players. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it this year, but the guy that's the captain next year, he's like, we've lost the last 2. We got to do something this year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk to all the guys on the team and just implement a little bit of strategy. And it's bound to give you quite a bit of an edge over all the other knuckleheads that are out there playing. And, going to your point of managing expectations, I feel like so many of us feel like we're disappointed simply because of our expectations. Going out thinking this is a birdie hole. And like you said, no, this is just a don't bogey hole. Or I was just talking to a client the other day and he's like, I'm really working on trying to hit the ball from right to left. He's, naturally hits the left to right. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm talking to Scott Fawcett this week and I don't think he's going to approve of that.
No, I mean, again, it's just trying to shape the ball both directions is so overrated. It's unbelievable. I mean, and again, this guy that just graduated from the Corn Ferry Tour that I had an hour-long conversation with yesterday, that was the one thing he wanted to talk about is like firm greens and shaping the ball. He's a fader and shaping it to like back left pins and stuff. I'm like, by definition, what you're laying out for me is a hole that's going to have a high scoring average. You don't have holes that you've got 180 and firm greens into aren't going to play several tenths of a shot over par. Like it just doesn't happen. So if we can get that ball on the green and make a par, again, this is the way you've got to think of this math is, okay, when Cam Smith won the Tour Championship, or not the Tournament of Champions a couple of years ago, he was 34 under par, and he was 14 shots clear of the field average. The year that Zach Johnson won the Masters, and all the announcers like to talk about, well, he didn't go for a single par 5. They kind of leave out the fact that nobody did that week. Literally, he won it 1 over. It was miserable. It was 45 degrees and misting. Like, it was not. So he didn't win because he didn't lay up. He won because everybody else laid up. He was laying up anyways. And it's just like about understanding these very basic mathematical odds. So if they're both 14 shots clear of the field average, and if we're on a hole that, because of the firm greens and all this stuff, it's playing with 4.2, if you can just take this shot and put it on the green and 2-putt it, you've gained 0.2 of a shot. That same kind of a shot, if you did that 72 times, you would be over 15 shots clear of the field average. You would literally win 100% of your starts on tour with, as I'm describing this to tour players, 90% of the time, they're like, well, that's not that hard to do. I'm like, then I would do that. And that's, again, where once you start getting these younger guys to think this way, I mean, again, I hate like saying the sky's the limit, but that's why, I mean, just every single one of them has got, whether they've got actual decade background or not, they've all at least heard and understand the ideas now. And that's why you're just seeing just scores are dropping and just, yeah, it's just the games. We make the game way harder than it has to be. It's actually, I haven't even thought of this thing in like 5 years, but it's this paradox that golf is so hard that you have to play it correctly, which then actually makes it relatively easy. I mean, if you just eliminate doing all the dumb stuff we do every single day, that's half the battle. At least.
What's been the biggest challenge working with some of the best players in the world? You got these guys that I would assume, there's probably some egos involved. There's guys that think that, they know their yardages. They know how well they hit it. They hit it better than anyone. What's that been like, trying to temper that?
Just using math at them. I mean, again, that's it. I mean, just literally stating, here's the facts. No one's going to do much better than these averages year in, year out. Because again, when I say much better, like obviously by definition, whoever's number one is doing really well. But if you break it down like per hole, it's just not that much. I mean, again, if you're gaining 0.9 of a shot in any given category, whether it's approach or putting or whatever, like you're probably leading or right there at it. It's 0.05 shots per hole. And again, like I realize doing that every single hole is a lot, but once you look at it on a per hole basis, it's just not. Again, it's indistinguishable for the most part. And that's, again, where I do believe that the majority of the players that are just great consistently, somehow, some way, they just understood this stuff at a young age.
When you look at a guy like Scheffler, who had a year, where, I think his scoring average was, one of the lowest ever, but his putting was, he was also one of the worst statistically on tour, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you explain that to people?
I mean, honestly, with him, I don't. I mean, it's interesting because variance does play such a large role. And so it's possible. One of the tour players I worked with a number of years ago, I was watching and he was like -3 and change putting. And I was just like, it was the first round after we had talked. I was like, oh my God. But I was also like, every single putt he has is between 15 and 25 feet. Like he just kept on hitting it to 15 to 25 feet. And literally within 4 minutes of him finishing his round, my phone rang and I picked it up and he's like, dude, that was amazing. He's like, the putting was not nearly however bad. He's like, I have no idea what the number was, but it was all over the hole all day. I was like, well, that's good. Because the thing I was going to tell you is it's entirely possible you putted well today, but just because of having this specific range of putts. And that's what I would say with Scheffler is it's entirely possible. I have no idea, but it's entirely possible he got off to just a little bit of bad luck, a little bit of bad variance through some part of the season, and then started trying to fix things that weren't potentially really broken. And then it just becomes mental. And it's sad, but man, that's so pervasive. And that's what I try to tell people. I actually use the stats and strokes gained to convince players I work with they're not as bad as something as they think they are, at a factor of 10 to 1 more than I use it to say, here's what you need to work on. I mean, I ask these questions all the time to players, but it's like, what do you think the average score is from blank? And I'm not kidding, 100% of the time they say a number lower than the actual expectation. I mean, you would think that even if they're all guessing too low, like maybe sometimes players would guess a higher number. 100% of the time they guess lower than the actual number by a wide margin too. And again, now if you're out there thinking from whatever, from 20 feet, you should make some certain percentage of them, and then you just keep missing 20 footers. It's pretty easy to get mental really quick. And that's, again, what I did, and a pretty big reason why I didn't make it. And that's what, again, once you start taking these younger players and convince them of these numbers, but you have to use the data and the math to do.
Well, and I think watching golf a lot, obviously we're seeing the best of the best, and we're seeing the best shots from the best of the best. So naturally our expectations, somehow we think we should be hitting shots like those. But we, so it's
because we've all hit one. So you're like, oh, I gotta do that more.
Yes,
I can't
exactly.
just do that.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. But then to go out and watch and follow a round of those guys, I had the chance to go out to the Corn Ferry Tour finals and walk and follow a couple of guys. And it's like, oh man, I didn't think the guys hit shots like that out here. And they sure do. I mean, they hit it all over the place sometimes too.
Well, and that's, again, I made this mistake in Houston one year. I missed the Monday qualifier. So I stayed at a buddy's house and I went out. David Duval was my man crush at the time. And I went out and followed him for 9 holes. And I swear to God, every single shot, and like I'm out there just with him. He's number 1 in the world. He's just striping everything. And I'm like, I drove home like, I can't compete with that. It never dawned on me I don't have to. And I'm honestly not even sure if I recognized at the time, because I was like, a couple of years ago, I was like, I've told that story a million times. How did he do in the tournament? And I went and looked at it. He won by 7 or 8. I'm like, yeah, the guy was playing pretty good golf at the time. And it's just
a lot.
It's just incredible. Again, it's such a cliche saying that golf, your main competitor is the course, but it really is the course and the average score. I mean, what everyone else is doing is literally, it's not irrelevant to you, but it's irrelevant to your game. It's the only ball. Some people try to take so much mindset and other studies from other sports and apply them to golf. And I'm like, it's just a different sport. It might be why we all love it, but it's just a different sport because there's no defense. There's no shared ball. Technically, aside from live with the shotgun, there's not even a mutual clock. Like, you just don't know what your opponent's going to do until it's kind of too late. And so it's just exhausting to be running all these iterations in your head of what these different scenarios for the win, top 10, top 25, making the cut. Like, no matter what, there's always some number you're close to. And again, I don't know that I would have appreciated this until Stuart Sink. He bought the app the week before he won in Napa. So his first win in 12 years came the week after he bought the app. And then he won 6 months later at Harbortown. And after his win in Harbortown, I went on PGA Tour radio one day and we're talking about it. And then he came on the next day, and his quote's super long, but it's amazing. But there was, towards the end of it, he's like, it takes the mental energy that used to be required to deliberate and make decisions like that. And Decade makes the decision for me, which keeps me fresh. It's pretty simple and I like using it. I'm like, I don't know that, because I've really, in the last 7 years, since 9 years, Jesus, I haven't really played that much golf myself. And so most of the golf I played there, or most of the time I was on the golf course, was caddying for Will for 5 or 6 straight years in the summers and everything, just because it was so fun. And now I'm just getting to play a little bit. And I don't think that I've ever appreciated how valuable that aspect is, just being less tired. And one of the main things about being less tired is just stop worrying about everybody else. Again, I talk a lot about meditation, and that's, I used to feel pretty spooky talking about it, like should be in California or something like that, not in Texas. But now that's the one good thing social media has brought, is the spotlight on Kobe and Jordan and Tiger. And you get so many more interviews with these people now with podcasts and everything, where they're a little more candid than they are maybe in books and stuff. And they're talking off the cuff. And you just find out that so many players have some sort of a meditation routine. You talked earlier about some of the players I work with, is like frustrating stuff. Like, I got one guy that should be a world beater. And, he asked me at the end of last season, what do I got to do to get into that top 10? And I'm like, you got to stop pouting. Like, you look like you could start crying at any second out there. And that's going to come from an awareness, and that's going to come from meditation, where you're more aware of your thoughts. You're not just being yanked around in any direction your brain tries to lead you. You can actually be aware of what you're thinking. And then again, it's easy to say, stop thinking it. That's the skill, and why having a practice, again, we're now talking about people that want to get to the highest level. It's incredible to me how hard it is to get people to do that. And I've got Tiger on audio saying, I play golf as a moving meditation, and my mom started me doing it when I was born. I'm like, there you go. You're not going to catch up to that guy, but you'd better start now. It's just so obvious that golf is a moving meditation, or the zone is a moving meditation. Golf is not a moving meditation. The zone is a moving meditation.
So you have Champions Q School coming up. So tell us, you said you haven't been playing a whole lot, but when is it, where is it? And then, tell us a little bit about your prep.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I played some pretty good golf this spring and early summer. And then I had 4 straight tournaments in July, and I played pretty good. I shot 64 in the first round of the Texas State Open and had the lead as a 50-year-old amateur. But then in the third round, I did something to my ankle. I was just walking, and I tore a muscle, like the ligament that goes around the back and behind your ankle. I tore somewhere where that attaches. And so I had to just basically take 6 weeks and do nothing but ankle rehab. And I didn't touch a club for over 2 months. And at this point now, I've played golf twice since July. I've got a simulator here in my house. So I've started hitting balls probably twice a week in the last 3 weeks, just to start like loosening up my joints and everything. And this is where it's weird, man. Again, with what I feel like I know, I usually drive it well. I actually got to play, one of the 2 times I played was in the Constellation Furyk and Friends Pro-Am. Again, with my electricity company, they sent me an email like 4 months ago saying, hey, would you like to compete with some of the best 50-year-old golfers on the planet? I'm like, that's pretty ironic. Yes, I would. So I actually went and played with Alex Chetka in the Pro-Am.
Oh, cool.
And that was the first time I'd played in 2.5 months, and I drove it great, which is funny to me. I don't really understand why, other than the fact I don't make it complicated. I just set up and just try to hit a hammered cut every single time. And, I've been doing this for 50 years, so I've gotten decent at it. And honestly, the way I feel like if I can just get out and at least putt for 10 hours over the next 3 weeks, which I should be doing 10 hours a week, my goal is to play, I'm going to get greedy and say 5 times. But Q School starts 4 weeks from 2 days ago. So Tuesday in 4 weeks. It's in California out at Saboba Springs. I think it's an Indian casino down there. Course looks good from the satellites, but I just chose it because it was the furthest time-wise first stage away, because I knew I needed as much time as physically possible. One of the stages starts next week. I'm like, that would not be good. But my ankle's feeling pretty good, pretty strong shoulders. I've also got a torn rotator cuff and some other stuff in my left shoulder. But it's feeling pretty good after doing all the rehab I've been on. So I'm definitely overly optimistic. I feel like I can get through first stage. Now, the problem is second stage is there's only 4 cards, and then just the top 20 guys get any sort of conditional status, which all that actually does for you on the Champions Tour is get you through the Thursday pre-qualifying. But that's really ultimately my goal, is to somehow get through first stage and then somehow play solid enough to top 20 at final stage. I feel like I can work some sort of a schedule. But if you have to do the Thursday qualifiers, you got to do the Thursday qualifier, the Monday qualifier, and then the tournament doesn't even start till the next Friday. As a guy who runs 2 companies with a wife and ex-wife and a 10 and 14-year-old girls, that ain't going to happen at all.
What does your training schedule or training look like? I mean, obviously you're a very fit guy. I know you hammer a ball. I mean, as far as like, a lot of the listeners that we have are in the 35 plus crowd. So very curious to see and hear what you do.
I usually try to get to the gym for at least an hour and a half or almost 2 hours, at least 4 days a week. I just do old man exercises. I've definitely enjoyed a number of different golf specific guys, but I just always wind up going back to the same 12 or so exercises. I've always enjoyed working out. I've been fatter at some point in my life, but I mean, I'm definitely the most in shape I've ever been. I had surgery on both elbows in 2021 to finally clear all that up. And then really just the last 2 years, I've probably put on 20 plus pounds of muscle, and gotten down to about 20% body fat. I can tell you're pretty lean and fit. So 20% is probably much higher than you are, but I don't really like the cardio, and I definitely like eating like crap. So I need to probably grow up out of that. But, yeah, so training, definitely just getting as strong as possible. Like, I just don't feel like that can be a bad idea, especially with all the science now of like, if you break a hip over the age of 65, it's like a 50% mortality rate in the next year. And it's like a 90% you're at least going to be incapacitated to some degree, whether that's a walker or something. And it's like just doing the most you can to keep as much muscle on your body. And that's where, yeah, I'd like to do more golf specific stuff, but I just don't have time for it. And I'm like half vain too, where I'm like, well, I wouldn't mind being bigger also. It definitely helps me hit the ball further. I actually think that too, having size, as weird as it sounds, helps with your chipping and putting. I think that Tiger's strength was as big of an asset in just stabilization and agility for his chipping and putting as it was for anything else. I mean, obviously the guy's the GOAT at essentially everything. So whatever he does can't be bad. I mean, I think it's funny when people give him a hard time saying he was on steroids and stuff back in the day. I'm like, you mean a 32-year-old athletic guy can't put on, I mean, again, you literally put on at that age, over a pound of muscle a year easily. Excuse me, a month. At, 12, 15 pounds over the course of years is nothing. And on his frame, that looks like 1 billion pounds of muscle. I've put on like 9 in the last 15 months, and I look noticeably bigger. Like and I'm 220. You take his 170-pound frame and put 15 pounds of muscle on it, it looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, again, he might have been, but I don't think that's mandatory. If it was, he probably wouldn't have gotten as injured.
When you say old man exercise, are you talking like squats, deadlifts, like that kind of stuff?
Squats, deadlifts, lat pull downs. I do like getting on the machine where you can do the arms back as well as turn around and do the flies. I've been doing a lot more of I need to do the exercises where you're abducting, I guess.
Yeah. We call it the good girl, bad girl machine.
Yeah. Good girl, bad girl. Oh my God, that's amazing. I've never heard that before somehow. That's incredible. I like doing the bad girl version of it because I feel like that helps your right glute as much as anything. And then obviously lat pull downs, tricep extensions. I've definitely been doing more face pulls. I've heard that that's really good for along the back of the shoulders. The lateral raises, front raises, calves. Yeah. And then squats. It's funny. I don't know why I've still never tried it, but the one where I think it's like a donkey kick or something where you get on on all your elbows and then you're down and then you're just like pushing back with one leg. That seems like a hell of a lot better exercise for the glute and for the golf motion than just a squat where you're still like seated when you're extending it into a full plane, I guess, from your head to your toes, a straight line. And I literally have never once tried it. I look at it every time and I'm like, that looks like such a better exercise. And I've never even gotten on the machine for some reason.
You're talking the one where you're almost like in a harness and you're leaning in and then pushing the weight back.
And then you're pushing back.
We don't have one here. We had one at our last facility, and no, it's a great machine. Plus, you're kind of suspended a little bit, so you're having to use a lot of core while activating, and you get the leg kind of in front of you and have to drive from there. So it's It's a great.
All right, there we go. I'm going to try it the next time I go.
Give it a try.
I tell you what, though, this is what's weird, man. I really have been a train wreck these last couple of years. I was planning on playing all day today, and I literally last night, I don't know what I did, but just beneath my rib cage and between my hip on the left side, there's a pain in there that it's dicey. I mean, I was asleep 15 minutes before we started because I just went and laid down. I don't know what I did, but man, it hurts. I'm lucky. I originally was like Googling and it said kidney stones. I'm like, I feel like if I got a kidney stone, I would literally just kill myself. I'm terrified of getting a kidney stone, but I guess that's supposed to be more around towards your spine. So I was like, thank God.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, it could be like some oblique and ab related stuff, depending on what's going on. But if it persists, better get that checked out for sure. For sure. All right, my friend, just a couple questions to finish off with here. I really appreciate your time today. This has been awesome. All right. So we asked this of everybody that comes on the show, Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore?
I'm changing on that as I get older. I definitely was a Caddyshack guy all along. Adam Sandler used to drive me crazy, but now my kids like his movies and my wife likes his movies, so I've been watching more of them. So I'm probably going to go with Happy Gilmore now.
All right. If you could pick a walk-up song to the first tee box, what's your walk-up song?
Oh, what is it? God dang it. I've literally answered this question just the other day, and it is, oh my God. There it is. The Rolling Stones, Paint It Black. I couldn't come up with that in my head.
Nice.
That opening guitar riff is just amazing.
Is there a book that you've, really dug into over the years, something that's meant a lot to you? Doesn't have to be golf, could be anything, but that you
100%.
tend to recommend to people?
The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. It is absolutely incredible. That's actually what Zalatoris and I've read it leading into the Texas AM. I bought him a copy. I'm like, I want you to read this thing before the tournament starts. And then at the US Junior, I didn't really realize at the time because I wasn't as much into the meditation stuff as I was, but we were staying about 45 minutes away from the golf course, and Will's dad is a little bit of a nervous driver, to say the least. And I was like, I can't ride with this guy for 45 minutes because he's on the brakes and on the gas and on the horn. I'm like, I cannot do this in Houston traffic. So I told him, I was like, hey, Will and I are just going to ride in my car so that way we can just talk a little bit and get in the right mindset. And he's like, absolutely, he's a good guy, whatever. And we literally were silent for 45 minutes every single day driving there, just listening to The Art of Learning. And just, it doesn't really matter where you pick it up. It's applicable to everyone's life, like literally every single chapter. And I don't think I realized at the time we were basically just doing almost an hour long, just meditation. Cause again, it was by design. I'm like, dude, we're going to be together all day. We just really shouldn't talk for the next 45 minutes. It is exhausting. It is dehydrating. Let's just get our minds right. And he was like, okay, cool. And so that's literally all the way to the course, and honestly, all the way home too. We would just sit there and listen to it. It was one of those deals. It was like our ritual at work. So we kept on doing it. I will say, this is the one question I wanted to add to also though. The tour player that I worked with yesterday, he was like, that's the most amazing book ever. He's like, I've read it at least 40 times and, over the course of the last couple of years. And he sent me an Audible of a book called Richer, Wiser, Happier by William Green. And so I literally haven't even started it yet, but this kid, played golf at an Ivy League school, and he's a good player and a good guy. And if that's the way I was looking at that, I go, well, if you recommended that one, I'm going to bet it's pretty damn good. You're not going to recommend a book you can't stand behind.
Awesome. Art of Learning's been on my list of books to read for the longest time. So this is definitely going to,
I would put that to the top, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Who would be your dream celebrity foursome if you got to play with anybody in the world? Doesn't matter who it is, past, dead or alive, anybody you'd love to play with.
I mean, that would definitely be Tiger. I would probably say Jordan. And then just to keep it fun, I'll say Mark Wahlberg.
Yes. Awesome.
Or DJ Khaled.
Let's go golfing. All right. Excluding Augusta and St. Andrews, because that's what seems to be what everybody picks. It's kind of like a Wheel of Fortune. We've taken out the certain letters. What's a bucket list course that if we could fuel up the jet right now and I said, Scott, we're going, where do you want to go? Where are you taking us?
The irony of that question is I've played Augusta National once, and it was on November 2nd, 7 years ago. So I played Augusta 7 years ago today, and it was brutal because it was actually just overseeded. So the fairways were all just long and wispy. The course is soaking wet, and we played it from a step off the back at like 7,800 yards. It was actually miserable. I actually need to go play it again closer to tournament conditions. If I had died and never played it, I'd be like, well, whatever. Nobody gets to play Augusta. But now that I've played it like that, I'm like, I have to see this thing closer. So I actually will say Augusta, but I will say, Pine Valley would have to be the one. Seminole, I love Florida, so Seminole would be cool, but I would probably go with Pine Valley, barely over it.
Awesome. All right. What's the best piece of golf advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, that's a good question. Can it be advice I gave myself?
Yeah, for
honestly,
sure.
I would say to start meditating, to know, to finally learn you don't have to get mad. I mean, it's funny because I get hundreds of thank you type emails. And I would say I get as many or more you've helped me in my life with the content than I get you've helped me purely with my golf game. I mean, and that's, if there's any one thing, like I said before we started, like I'm not really impressed with this world we're putting together here with phones and social media and everything. And that's one of the reasons that if there's any one thing I would like to hang my hat on at the end of whatever career this is just getting more people into meditation and accepting that a thought is just a thought and they can not live, based on whatever the next thought is in their head. I mean, again, I talk a lot about Sam Harris, but his Waking Up app, I literally recommend that almost more than I recommend my own app. Now, the convenient thing for me is Sam will actually give it away to you for free. If you just Google Waking Up free, he's a nicer guy than I am. But just learning that a thought is nothing more than a thought, and you do not have to just let it dictate your actions. It's just, I wish I would have known and understood that younger.
That's amazing. I love it. All right, my friend, this has been so much fun. I've learned so much and definitely want to dig in more into the Decade app. Tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, where people can find it. And I know that there's a couple different levels, so feel free to tell everybody.
Yeah, you can just go to decade.golf. We finally tried to take this business serious over the last 9 months. At first, I was just always kind of like, yeah, it's fun, passive income and whatever. It's finally gotten to the point where it's kind of big enough that it's a real deal and lots of fun. So we finally got decade.golf up and running. Foundations, like I say, the two are identical. Foundations is definitely designed, Foundations and Elite. Foundations is definitely theoretically designed for a junior golfer to force them to go slower. We have free yardage books. So if you're a person who actually plays golf and uses yardage books at all, I really tried to design the app to where it pays for itself. You get Elite, you get 52 free yardage books a year, it should be 48. And with Foundations, you get one a month for the 6 months. Because I figure those players aren't probably playing quite as many tournaments, and we do have a cost associated with the yardage book, but you just type in what course you're playing, and we've got all 42,000 courses on the planet in the database. If you look at it and yours is not updated, you just have to send us an email and we will get the course updated usually in about 48 hours or less. So decade.golf, thankfully I punted Twitter because it's such a cesspool. Instagram is, I think it's decade_golf. And those are the main places.
Cool. We'll have it all linked up in the show too. And congrats on punting Twitter. That's awesome.
Yeah. That was the best move. I mean, literally that was a top 5 move of my life.
I can only imagine. So much more headspace now.
Oh my God. The inbound is just incredible. And what the problem is they think they're arguing about opinions. I'm like, this is now a mathematical certainty. Like you are literally arguing 2 + 2 is 5. If you could just take a second. And what I finally realized with Twitter is you have to condense your idea into one post. That's why I'm considered like so just like blunt and kind of an a-hole, is just because I might get 100,000 views on the first tweet and like 10,000 on the second and like 8 on the third. So it's like, if you don't get it all into one post, you might as well not even try, because no one's going to read it all. And then, so you might as well just be as direct as you can, which apparently is really hard to do. For me.
Yeah, it comes off a little different in text than it does in person.
Exactly.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you so much for your time, and really looking forward to sharing this with the 18 Strong crew.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast. Don't forget to go follow us over on Instagram at 18 Strong. And if you found this episode helpful and want to help us spread the 18 Strong mission, we'd really appreciate if you shared with your friends. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.